Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
I think it's time we acknowledge something on this show. A growing consensus about the Trump administration. Call the way Donald Trump fashions himself whatever you want. A would-be dictator, an autocrat. But an essential ingredient of what he's doing in Washington is straight-up revenge. This shouldn't really be a surprise. Trump openly mused about revenge while he campaigned for a second term in office. Shane Harris from over at The Atlantic, he remembers it.
Oh, Donald Trump talked a lot about revenge in the 2024 campaign. I mean, it was, I think the words that he used sometimes in his speech were, I am your vengeance, I am your retribution.
How's that whole revenge plan working out for him?
It seems like it's going swimmingly.
Who Donald Trump wants revenge on is a broad category. But for Shane, the most obvious targets are people who worked in government, sometimes for the president himself, and dared to speak out against him.
I mean, there's a long list of people who served in very senior roles in the administration or in the White House or who were cabinet secretaries who've come out and publicly said in so many words and sometimes explicitly, Donald Trump is not fit for office and he shouldn't be reelected president. Those people are now finding that the administration, at Trump's direction, explicitly in some cases, are taking action against them that is designed to make their life miserable.
Breaking news just now, FBI agents have raided former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton's Washington, D.C. area home early this morning. A source familiar with
Last week, it was former National Security Advisor John Bolton's turn to feel the misery.
My first reaction when I saw this going down was, okay, here we go.
Sources familiar with the search told CBS News it is related in part to a classified documents investigation. Meanwhile, FBI...
In Bolton's case, I mean, this appears to be a criminal investigation that, we don't know the origins of it entirely. And there may be some new reasons for why this is being opened up. But it's hard to escape the idea that this is, at least in part, motivated by the president's desire to take some retribution against Bolton, who has been one of his most ferocious critics and has been criticizing him and his Ukraine policy even in the past week or so.
Your piece on the Bolton raid had the headline, "The John Bolton raid feels like a warning." What was it a warning about?
I think it's a warning that we have entered a new phase of this war against the so-called deep state. This might be the week that Trump's revenge campaign against the intelligence community kicked into high gear.
Today on the show, it is not just John Bolton feeling shook by last week's FBI raid. We'll explain why. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
Let's play Burlington's Guess That Price. Back to school means back to saving. We're bringing you kids' jeans starting at, hold on a minute, just $11.99. Burlington's acing this test. What about character backpacks? We've got them starting at $12.99. Burlington's done it again. How about sneakers for the kids? A-plus brands and right on trend starting at $11.99. Saving is now in session. Burlington, deals, brands, wow! Styles and selections vary by location.
Put us in a box. Go ahead. That just gives us something to break out of. Because the next generation 2025 GMC Terrain Elevation is raising the standard of what comes standard. As far as expectations go, why meet them when you can shatter them? What we choose to challenge, we challenge completely. We are professional grade. Visit GMC.com to learn more.
Let's take a step back and remind people about John Bolton, what role he played in the first Trump administration, why he was and continues to be such a lightning rod.
Yeah, so John Bolton, he was the national security advisor to President Trump from around April 2018 through September of 2019, so roughly a year and a half or so.
Not a long tenure.
Not a long tenure, but they didn't last too long in the first Trump administration.
Yeah.
So Bolton was a really well-known figure when he joined the Trump White House. He had been United States ambassador to the UN during the George W. Bush administration, really well-known kind of neoconservative foreign policy thinker, hawkish, a very visible person in the media, a pundit, just a really all-around, very seasoned conservative diplomat, political commentator.
Yeah, diplomat, but also not super interested in diplomacy. He's kind of a bomb first, ask questions later kind of guy.
Yeah.
And very caustic. I feel like that's important to set up who he is.
Yeah, for sure. And Bolton, has a really strong personality. He is somebody who, famously talked about, if you blew up the UN headquarters, it wouldn't really matter. I think that was while he was the ambassador to the UN. It's the kind of person that, when John Bolton shows up on the television screen in a Fox News hit, you kind of know what you're going to get. And is somebody who is a really divisive character. And I think really embraces that.
Yeah. It's funny because when I saw the raid last week, I just thought it makes sense that the Trump-led FBI would be picking off John Bolton in this way, maybe first, just because he isn't Mr. Popularity. You know what I mean? He's an easy person to go after in this way because it's not like a bunch of people are going to be like, I love that guy.
Exactly. I can't speak to the logic of why they did the raid on Bolton when they did, from a political perspective. But if you were sort of putting yourselves in the heads of people in the administration and saying, okay, who can we go after first? There's not going to be a lot of people on the left or right crying a lot of tears for John Bolton personally. And so maybe he was an effective first person to go after in that way. Yeah.
So John Bolton was in the first Trump White House. When did his relationship with Donald Trump begin to sour?
You could argue that it's from the moment he walked in the door. This was somebody, and he writes, pretty vividly about this in his memoir, who was not on the same page with much of the president's policies and really the president's style. Bolton, was a big advocate for pulling the United States out of the agreement to pause Iran's nuclear weapons programs in exchange for sanctions relief, the so-called Iran nuclear deal, and achieved that. But the two of them just never got along. And so I think this was always destined for a breakup. And by the time that Bolton leaves in September 2019, I think that the relationship has gone, really sour and is, irreparable. And it's not long after that John Bolton, starts trying to publish a memoir about what a incompetent leader Donald Trump is.
Yeah, and that memoir is kind of at the heart of a lot of the investigations we know about into John Bolton. His memoir was called The Room Where It Happened. Did you read it?
I have read it, yeah.
I think the allegations were that John Bolton had classified information in this book. When you read it, did that stand out to you?
It did not, no. And I've read a lot of memoirs from former national security officials and directors of CIA, and it didn't strike me that there was anything in this book that was so obviously classified or revealing.
Other people have disagreed on that.
Yeah, in fact, well, do you want me to recount the sort of the saga of the classified information review of the book?
Go for it. Yeah.
So Bolton writes this book. He doesn't believe that he needs to submit this book for any kind of pre-publication review to ensure that it doesn't have classified information. He doesn't think there's any classified information in it. And he even believes that the tradition of doing this kind of pre-publication review is not really well rooted in the law, and he has some arguments on that. But he basically decides to go ahead and submit it anyway, just to be very sure. And over the course of about 4 months, there's this lengthy back and forth between Bolton and career officials in the government who are looking at the manuscript, reading it over and over again, and they're flagging like down to the line or even the word, this might be considered classified, this might be too sensitive. And they have this back and forth where Bolton basically takes their directions and edits the manuscript in such a way that these career professionals feel comfortable that it's not going to reveal anything classified or overly sensitive. So Bolton, essentially hears from these career officials, okay, we've done the review. Basically there's like a formal okay that we're waiting to get. But from our perspective, you're essentially ready to go. In so many words, they say this. So Bolton thinks that he's in the clear. Unbeknownst to Bolton and the people who were doing his review in the government, the White House had ordered a separate, more secretive review of the manuscript led by a political appointee. And that person comes up from the review and says, oh, this manuscript is just filled with classified information. I mean, this can't be published. This is ridiculous.
But it's already in the process of being published at this point, right?
Not only is it in the process of about going to publish, they're kind of blowing through deadlines here. I mean, this I can only imagine that his publisher is thinking, we got to get the green light here because we've got to go to the printing presses and physically make this book and ship it. And so, the political appointee says, nope, there's all kinds of problematic stuff here. And this woman, Ellen Knight, who led this review, she says, I sat down with this political appointee, and it became very clear to her, she says, that what the White House was trying to do was silence John Bolton, not protect classified information. And John Bolton is left saying, basically, I got to publish this memoir. And he decides to go ahead and publish it.
I mean, it's interesting, though, because the book gets out there and eventually a civil judge gets involved. And the civil judge basically says, yeah, there might be classified information in here, probably is, but it's already out in the public record. And so any kind of injunction on the book, it's already been published. It won't have an effect. There was a criminal probe. Joe Biden's administration dropped that. So it's just this funny investigation that really doesn't go anywhere, even though there's maybe a little smoke there.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that, from my reporting, one reason that the Biden administration, the Justice Department, did not go forward with this is just as you say. I mean, the book was already out. There's this lengthy record of Bolton submitting the manuscript in good faith, although begrudgingly editing it. And officials didn't really feel like they were going to win a case in front of a jury on this, which is not to say that John Bolton did everything by the book, so to speak. But this is not a case that DOJ was willing to bring, and it just kind of withers. There's also statute of limitations questions. It may have expired by now, which kind of leads us to this question of, well, then what's going on with this FBI raid? And why is the Trump administration, now looking at John Bolton with what looks like an eye towards possibly indicting him?
Yeah. I mean, you've said this, but a search like the one that happened last week needs a magistrate judge to sign off on it. And in this case, it needed 2 judges because the searches span 2 federal districts. Do we know why the judges signed off on all this?
We don't yet. We haven't seen the search warrant, but we have some clues here. So the New York Post actually last week had a very interesting bit of information in one of their stories where they were saying that this investigation stems from Bolton allegedly emailing highly sensitive classified materials through a private email server when he was in the White House.
So we're back to private email servers again.
We're back to emails again. Now it's his emails. Exactly. And notably, I want to point out that this Post article is sourced to high-ranking FBI officials. And, there's an art to how you anonymously quote people. And notably, this article is not saying U.S. officials. It's saying high-ranking FBI officials. Look, I can't speak to who the New York Post sources are, but that is basically saying the source is either Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, or Dan Bongino, the deputy director, or someone who has been deputized to speak on behalf of the FBI.
Yeah. I mean, It's funny to talk about this case because it sure looks like revenge, but it's hard to say it is revenge on President Trump or his cabinet's part because we don't know all the details. And I think what's interesting about your reporting is that you place what's happening with John Bolton in a wider context of what's happening with other higher mid-level bureaucrat folks, mostly who work in intelligence, and how they're feeling pressured in this moment. Now that we've talked about John Bolton, can you just lay out what else has been happening that sort of made the John Bolton thing so troubling to you?
Yeah, well, earlier in the week on Tuesday, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, announced that she was revoking the security clearances of 37 current and former officials, which was really troubling for a couple of reasons. One, many of these individuals, what they seem to have in common was that they, in 2016, worked on efforts to counter and expose Russia's interference in the presidential election, which we'll all remember is what Donald Trump calls the Russia hoax. And so this revocation of these security clearances in that context, you cannot read this, in my opinion, in any other way than pure political retribution.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Tulsi Gabbard, right? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth pushed out the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, as Bolton was being raided, Pete Hegseth fired the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, a serving military officer.
What was the reasoning there?
The reasoning is never, it's never overt. It's always like, well, we want to go in a different direction, or like we have questions about his leadership. What I think is notable about this case is that shortly after the U.S. bombed Iranian nuclear facilities early in the summer, the Defense Intelligence Agency produced a very preliminary assessment that said that the bombing may have only set back Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons by a few months.
And this is after Donald Trump said we'd, obliterated things.
Obliterated, right. So the DIA is not on the same page. Now, that report gets leaked to the press and it comes out and it causes just consternation in the White House. And of course, they start, basically shooting the messenger. And so now the guy who is the 3-star general in charge of DIA, Jeffrey Cruz, he's been fired and will presumably be replaced with somebody who is more politically in line or amenable to the administration, or who, the worry here is that a new director would try to silence reports that looked critical of the administration's policies or not on the same page, which is a terrible thing to happen in the intelligence community. I mean, policymakers need to hear information that is both good and bad from their perspective politically, because the intelligence committee is supposed to produce apolitical information. Like, we are just telling you, these are the facts. You may like them, you may not like them, but you need to know this to make decisions. And if the effect of firing the head of an agency or stripping the security clearances of senior intelligence officers is going to be that intelligence agencies simply just stay quiet or don't tell the president something that might make him mad or embarrass him, national security in this country is going to be weakened because of that. If there is this sort of self-imposed restraint for political reasons on the intelligence community, this country is not going to be as safe as it otherwise would be.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. Goldbelly ships Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So, if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT. That's goldbelly.com, promo code GIFT.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Visit Blinds.com now for up to 50% off with minimum purchase plus a professional measure at no cost. Rules and restrictions apply.
We've talked about people who are retired, who've been fired from the intelligence community, all kinds of folks like that, people being investigated. But I'm kind of curious how all of this is trickling down to the people who remain in the intelligence community and in the government more generally. Like, you've written that what's happening right now is terrorizing the workforce that remains. How is that playing out for them? Like, what does that mean for their day-to-day jobs?
A lot of people I've talked to who've shared their stories and shared the stories of their colleagues, their day-to-day consists of sometimes looking for new work, wondering how much longer they can take it, wondering when they might be pushed out. Everybody is kind of in this pattern of, wondering, should I leave Washington and go work in some, office on the other side of the country for a few years and kind of ride this out? Should I leave government altogether?
Well, and all this is happening in Washington largely, where there's kind of like a mini recession happening because so many people have been fired or on leave.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the city already feels like, it's suffering economically, and we're in this really uncertain period as, oh, by the way, National Guard troops and federal law enforcement are walking our streets. So there's this tremendous anxiety. And that's sort of like, what's happening to the workforce now. The other downstream effect that I think that people are just starting to now appreciate that is going to be potentially so detrimental to U.S. national security is younger people, bright people, maybe from the private sector, the kind of class of person who the intelligence communities are always very eager to recruit. I'm not sure those people are going to want to come work for the government if this is how it treats people in the national security agencies. And I quoted one person in my story, a guy named Mark Polymeropoulos, who spent most of his career as a CIA operations officer, working around the world, some really dangerous places. And he said, look, I used to go around, several times a month lecturing students and colleges, people who were interested in working for the government, and I no longer advise them to do so. I counsel young people, don't go work for the U.S. intelligence community.
Wow.
That's really astonishing. If people who dedicated their lives to this line of work are telling young people, you don't want to do this, because it's not going to be safe for you, because you might be forced to do things that are immoral or violate your ethics, or worse, possibly violate the law. This is what people are talking about now.
But it makes sense when it's like, one of your sources told you they'd hired personal security for their home.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that person is still in the government or recently departed, but either way, it's not great.
No, it's not great at all. And when these individuals are identified by name as, being part of, Tulsi Gabbard's alleged coup against Donald Trump, they're attacked on social media. I mean, they could be doxxed. I mean, their addresses sometimes are getting out there. I mean, there are real world repercussions for being identified by this administration as part of some kind of sinister deep state that's been out to get Donald Trump.
I mean, you rely on sources, often sources inside the government, to give you accurate information to do your work. I gotta ask, given everything you've said just now about what's happening inside these agencies, do you now have concerns about the information you're getting as a journalist?
Well, I trust my sources. And I trust people who I've known for a long time and have been historically reliable. But this does, for me and for people I talk to, raise a lot of concerns, these recent episodes, about the veracity of the information that the intelligence agencies might put out publicly. My posture towards the politically appointed leadership of these agencies has changed.
How so?
Well, I don't think you can take them at face value anymore. And, which is not to say that heads of the FBI and directors of the CIA have always been trustworthy and you can take it to the bank. But, I've never, in my 25 years covering this subject, had a situation where the heads of these agencies were so obviously not telling the truth about information they were entering into the record, and were so brazenly acting for political purposes and in ways that are clearly designed to help the president politically. This is a departure from the way these agencies normally operate. And I do think that colors how the public should think about information that they're putting out publicly. And again, I trust my sources. At the same time, if the administration comes out and talks about, effects of bombing Iranian nuclear facilities, do I take that to the bank? No.
Yeah, I was listening to a conversation between a couple of journalists too, and they were talking about how one of the other downstream effects here is the fact that if you're a journalist reaching out to sources, like let's say you want to reach out to John Bolton and get a comment after this raid on his home, all of a sudden you have every right to think maybe his phone's tapped, maybe they know whose text he's getting. Do you want to really be ensnared in whatever's happening here? And that creates a whole other layer of fear about just even the basics of doing your job.
Yeah, I mean, we always have to be careful as reporters, particularly national security reporters, about how we communicate with sources. And I don't know anyone in my profession, who thinks that the administration is not going to eventually start targeting journalists. I mean, they essentially, in many ways, already have with, the way they've gone after CBS and ABC News. But, that's the environment that we're operating in. It is extremely difficult. It is scary. And it's not normal.
Yeah, that's maybe the bottom line. What's happening here isn't normal.
It is not normal. None of this is normal.
Shane, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks, Mary. Great to talk to you.
Shane Harris covers national security and intelligence over at The Atlantic. If you want to hear about someone who's trying to fight back against some of this not normal that's floating around, check out the latest episode of Amicus. That is our podcast about the courts. Mark Joseph Stern talks to a litigator with Pregnancy Justice, which is working to represent women who have been charged with crimes against their own fetuses and embryos. You can find that by searching for Amicus in your podcatcher of choice. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Ethan Oberman, and Madeline Ducharme. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. Say, hey, I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.